The recording is on. Mr. Bro, I'm really happy to see you on UTV today. It's a little bit unusual because I'm filming this from my home vlogger studio like. And the first question for you, what the hell is going on right now with United States foreign policy, because we have all these scandalous claims about Canada, about Panama, tariff wars. What is going on?
Thanks for having me back, Pavlo. And that is not an easy first question. I wish I could give you certainty and clarity, but certainty and clarity is not something Donald Trump has ever embraced his entire life. He has his own style of madman politics where he says and does outrageous things just to distract people. He likes basically saying things and getting reactions in real time. He's not careful with his words at all. And that's how he's lived and operated his whole life. And it's hard to argue with his success rates. So if something is working for him, he's probably going to keep doing it. Now, what has he actually done? We can ignore what he says. And yes, he signed these executive orders, a 10% tariff on China, all imported goods. Okay. 25% on imports from Mexico, 25% on imports from Canada, except energy, which is at 10%. And I don't understand them. I think a lot of Americans are confused right now. In my main update video yesterday, I did my best to try to understand them and explain them to my audience. There's a lot of people in Mexico, Canada, and the United States furious right now because tariffs are taxes. If you impose tariffs, it's basically a sales tax on imported goods. And in general, most people don't enjoy paying higher prices for tomatoes and coffee and avocados and we're talking about food staples because that's something everyone has to do. Everyone has to eat every day. But once you basically bake into the supply chain all of these 25% increases with global supply chains, it'll affect everything. Inflation over the last 2 years in the United States was coming down. And if these tariffs hold, if they stay in place, they're going to go back up. Everything. Healthcare will get more expensive. Building costs will get more expensive. Um, Automobiles will become more expensive. It's just unavoidable. Tariffs are barriers to trade, which creates inefficiency in the global supply chains. When you have inefficiency, companies aren't as profitable. If they're not as profitable, they can't pay workers as well or hire as many workers. So I wish I could explain to you what the objective is here. And Donald Trump, with Canada especially, is talking about annexation. His hardcore supporters are saying we're going to economically cripple Canada to the point where they'll be begging us to join the Union and become the 51st state. That is insane. That is irresponsible and dangerous rhetoric for Donald Trump's core supporters to be advocating that a country like Canada give up its sovereignty and become subordinate to Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. That's offensive. That's outrageous. There's no need for this. Canada is America's closest friend and ally and has been so for over a century. So yeah, as a red-blooded patriotic American, I'm horrified by this new wave of imperialism. And we're seeing the reaction on Kremlin state TV. They love this language from Donald Trump because it justifies their action invading Ukraine, saying Ukraine's territory should belong to them because they have security concerns. When Donald Trump says he might use military force to take Greenland because we have security concerns, there's no difference in language. So I want your audience to know there are Americans like me who are horrified. We are going to resist. We are not going to tolerate Donald Trump believing America is an imperial empire that can just use its military might to push people around and seize whatever territory and resources we want. That's not America. Those are not American values.
Yeah, and people are like forgetting that there's a neo-imperialist war in Ukraine here, fought by Russia, waged by Russia against Ukraine. Maybe those tariffs and those threats of imperial occupation of Canada are just a stimuli for them to be aware of what Ukraine is going on through. I'm not saying that I'm correct on this or it is true, but I really do not believe that something aggressive against Canada is possible. Yeah, in Greenland there can be objectively some more deployment of NATO troops or American troops, but about Canada, that seems really weird.
Canada, unfortunately, does not have unifying geography. So Canada doesn't trade, like Canadians trade more with America than they do with other Canadians, because of the geography of Canada. It's really like five different regions, and each region separated by mountains or rivers or the Arctic tundra. These regions of Canada have to be integrated north south. So Canadians trade north south with, Vancouver in the Pacific Northwest, or Detroit and Hamilton, or those cities on the other sides of the Great Lakes, or the Maritimes in Maine. So Canadians and the United States, we're deeply economically integrated. There's no reason for us to use our military to subjugate them and force them into our country. But the United States and Canada has always had a special relationship. I think the U.S. Canadian border is the longest undefended border in the world, because what's the concern? Donald Trump is trying to make these outrageous claims of illegals coming across the Canadian border, and they're bringing crime and drugs, and there's just no evidence to substantiate this on any kind of significant scale to justify these threats and disruptions to people's daily lives. And I woke up this morning and the president of Mexico said that some kind of deal was being made. I don't know if these tariffs will stick. When people start complaining in mass, when Donald Trump's own supporters start complaining in mass, he tends to back down and then say it was some brilliant strategy to get something else accomplished, and then he makes an outrageous statement, and we all forget what he just did, and we moved on. That it's not any more complicated than that. It's pretty stupid, and we've got another 4 years of this, unfortunately.
And there is one more rhetoric that is coming out of the presidential administration of Donald Trump right now, that negotiations between Russia and the US, I believe, are in the preparation phase about Ukraine ceasefire. So we're talking about possible elections. Mr. Keith Kellogg has said out loud that the US would like to see elections in Ukraine, first presidential, then parliamentary ones. And elections are not possible without any kind of ceasefire or peace agreement. And is that a positive dynamic for Americans, for Ukrainians and Europeans, that these that these preparations of negotiations are going right now, when Russia is having their role in advance in the east of our country? They are killing up to 2,000 of their soldiers per day, but still they are gaining footholds and preparing more and more advances.
Concerning peace talks, uh, there's a difference. So, President Zelensky on the Lex Friedman podcast said, as soon as there's a ceasefire and Ukraine has security guarantees that the war has stopped, he'll call for new elections within 90 days. Ukraine can end martial law once the war has finished. But getting security guarantees and the war is finished is different than just a ceasefire. Russia could agree to a ceasefire today and then violate it in a week. There has to be protections. There has to be security guarantees for Ukrainians that the war is done, that Russia is going to stop attacking them. Otherwise, you can't end martial law and you can't call for elections in 90 days. I don't doubt for a second that Ukrainians would love to have free and fair democratic elections. President Zelensky would love to have an election to be legitimate. I say he is legitimate, but people are questioning his legitimacy. And there's no reason for him to avoid elections when the obvious reason what Russia wants is they want to get rid of Zelensky because he's built up such a reputation and so much goodwill the last 3 years. They would prefer anyone with less recognition, less political ties, less standing in the world. Um, so Russia is, I think, trying to get rid of Zelensky, and they're talking to the Americans saying Ukraine needs to have an election. Why would Russia care if Ukraine has an election when they have a dictator who's been in power for 25 years? Lukashenko's now been in power for 30 years, and he just gave himself a re-election. That was very nice of him to give himself that. So there's some politics playing here, and honestly, these people are not that smart. It's pretty transparent. It's pretty stupid. I don't see Ukraine falling for this, and General Keith Kellogg can ask. There's nothing wrong with asking, but I think the correct response from the Ukrainian government is no, we're not going to have elections until we have security guarantees, either some kind of bilateral agreement with NATO for protection or UN peacekeeping troops or French and UK forces or something to make this stop. And then we'll worry about polling locations and who's going to be the new mayor of Poltava or whatever. Like, there are more important things right now than um, trying to have these elections to satisfy Russia's concerns about Ukraine's democratic legitimacy, which is outrageous to even say out loud.
The key to this might be that Russians want to bring back their pro Russian political parties back into the parliament because right now there is a majority of the president. There have been issues to cancel the Russian Orthodox Church of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, which has long ties to the Kremlin, to the KGB. They've been working and preparing to take over Ukraine in 2022, and they would really like to get all of that influence back. They really got stripped of that influence in the parliament with the president, because the last pro-Russian president was Viktor Yanukovych, and in the parliament too, in the church. It is really important for them to change that.
Russia has been committing cultural and ethnic genocide for 500 years of the indigenous peoples of the Caucasus, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and they do it with the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is just a political continuation of Putin and his government, and they do it through their language. You know, anywhere somebody is speaking Russian, they say that person is Russian, and therefore that should be Russian territory. Hitler made the exact same arguments in the 1930s. Why are there German speaking people, in that territory, the Rhineland in Czechoslovakia or whatever, that should belong to Germany. Our military should take it by force. So there needs to be this detachment. I've made this argument that uh, language does not equal nationality. How many English speaking countries are there in the world? Does that mean we should all be part of England or Great Britain? No, they're the remnants of the British Empire. How many Spanish speaking countries are there in the world? 14, 18, I don't know. Remnants of the Spanish Empire. They don't all have to be one country. How many Arabic speaking countries are there in the world? Close to 20. Remnants of, Arabic or the Ottoman Empire. And just because you speak the same language doesn't mean you have to be the same country. And Russians, I don't think even entertain that concept that you can have potentially 14 or 15 new countries across Central Asia and the Caucasus if Russia dissolves. And it's fine. It's good. I think we need to break this cycle of power concentrating in the Kremlin and free these people, free these indigenous people to benefit from the natural resources on the land that their people have been living on for centuries.
And actually, they all have nations. So these Buryat people, um, Chudvet, and other Finno-Hungaric peoples in the Russian territory, they are all nations subjugated by Russia by force.
Chechnya.
The Tatars, Chechnya, yes, yes. There's actually a story which tells that Ukrainians and Chechens share the same blood, because in the Holodomor of 1933, many hundreds of and thousands of Ukrainian children were transported to Chechnya, as one of the closest regions in the Caucasus to save them from starvation. And these stories live on. We have a different project on our channel about the Caucasus, and I have seen those witnesses, like children and grandchildren of those people who were moved to Chechnya from Ukraine. And about nation building, we have Belgian people speaking French, and we also have Germans and Austrians speaking German language. It is, yeah, I agree with you that language is not a nation building aspect, not the most important one, but only in Ukraine people speak Ukrainian, and that's the key.
They used to speak Ukrainian in parts of, Krasnodar and Kursk, and your nation's language has been in retreat because Russia has
Mhm.
been absorbing and Russifying and expanding, and that's been their goal for centuries. And it's just a continuation. Russia, modern day Russia, and Putin and his KGB friends, they never bought into the UN Charter and the sovereignty of nations. They never believed that Russia could be anything other than an empire. I think Putin, as soon as he took office, he knew the dire states of the Russian economy and the state. And maybe in the beginning, he didn't think it'd be possible, but I think once he came back to power in 2012, he had to, for constitutional reasons, let Medvedev serve a single term. But as soon as he came back in 2012, I think he set the objective that he was going to get back all the territories he wanted. I don't know if Putin genuinely cares about or wants some of the Central Asian republics, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, but the Baltics for sure. But perhaps Finland, parts of Poland, Moldova, absolutely, parts of Romania. These wars are never going to end if Putin is allowed to succeed. So it's critical that the world continues to stand with Ukraine. Going back 3 years, nobody predicted this. Nobody 3 years ago was saying this would be a protracted conflict in which Russia would struggle to capture the village of Chasiv Yar. That Bakhmut fell 2 years ago. The next village on the road, Bakhmut fell to Prigozhin and the Wagner mercenaries. And for 2 years, they've been assaulting Chasiv Yar with daily attacks. And it's 10 kilometers. The mighty Russian military has gone 10 kilometers in 2 years, and they're screaming that they're winning somehow. And on my channel and my videos, I just laugh at them every day. That's what people should be doing. They should be
That
laughing at
is
the Russians for embarrassing themselves.
that is really insightful because 10 kilometers in 2 years is far beyond even the I don't know, World War II scale, because the Kursk battle, the counteroffensive of the Soviet, of this Red Army, and in fact, many of our ancestors served in the Red Army and defeated Nazis together, and it was really different. What is happening now really looks like World War One, and in World War One, as far as I remember, there were no winners, just grief and just pain, and the events that led to World War II in the main place. And I really hope that the war against Ukraine, the Russia's war against Ukraine, will be resolved in a manner that will keep and restore this global world order and prevent the horrible World War III. And that is a great fear to be aware of. And we remember Munich. You said about Czechoslovakia. Everyone on the negotiation was present. Italy was present. Germany, Britain, and United States, I believe, but not Czechoslovakia when
Yep.
Czechoslovak territory was given away. That's a lesson of history. And I really hope that our friends, our partners, and people in the United States administration will will see those lessons, and we always believe in the best, and it is really great to have you in our studio. It's so insightful, it's so full of it's so convincing to listen to you. Just that's kind of a magic. Thank you very much. Maybe you have some more remarks, like final remarks on this interview. Go ahead.
History repeats itself because human nature doesn't change. The human psyche, the human physiology, the human mind has more or less been the same for tens of thousands of years. And I do believe that empire is the natural state of man. If there are no external guiding factors or controls, if you just put a couple million people together in a culture, civilization, society, power always concentrates at the top with a king or a monarch, a potentate, whatever you want to call them. The guy in charge always wants to be safe and secure at the top, so he eliminates all of his rivals. And then he becomes paranoid that the monarch to his left or to his right might try to attack his kingdom and steal his stuff. So, what he does is he builds up his army first to go attack his neighbor to steal their stuff before they steal his. And it's stupid. And for 10,000 years of human civilization, ever since ancient Egypt, and we started building up agricultural surpluses to support militaries, this is what humans have been doing. And it got so destructive by 1945, over 50 million people dead from World War II, that we really tried to do something different. The United States, it's called the Bretton Woods Agreements. The United States Navy said, we're going to patrol the world's oceans, guarantee free trade. Nations that trade together shouldn't go to war together. That was the guiding philosophy for the last 70 or 80 years. And there's just so many people alive today that have forgotten, why did we impose this global political system on ourselves? And it was to stop dictators like Putin and dictators like Xi from reinitiating the cycle of empire and gobbling up your smaller neighbors. Get big before somebody bigger comes along and attacks you first. So we're lucky that China and India have been holding back. You can't really call this a world war where it is right now because Russia doesn't have any real allies. Belarus is not a real ally. Iran and North Korea, they're sending some weapons. North Korea sent 10,000 troops, but that's nothing on the scale of the clash of civilizations, in World War One and World War Two. So we've, for 3 years, avoided the nightmare scenario of tens of millions of dead in a nuclear war. And we haven't made the final decision. Do we want to commit to that path, or do we want to pull back and try and maintain the global rules based order, the UN Charter, human rights that we've been trying. Human civilization has been trying for the last 70 or 80 years. And I'm going to fight to maintain that because that's a peaceful and prosperous world and if I have children someday, I want them to live in, as opposed to the alternative of continuous warfare and misery and suffering. And we're not there yet, but we'll see. I know you guys in Ukraine, you're doing your part. As long as Ukraine holds, this prevents the next war. So I thank you for that. But we got to get this done this year. Ukraine needs real peace and security. We got to find a way to make the Russians stop. Hopefully, we're moving in the right direction in the short term.
Let us hope for that. Let us really pray that peace comes in already this year, and that this peace will be a backholder for the imperial and neo-imperial aggression of all sorts, of all possible dictators in the world. Thank you again, Mr. Bro. It was it as always. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo.